Afternoon, folks. It's 4:56 in the afternoon on a Monday, the 29th of April, 2024. The Weaver, John C. of Roseman, California, which is me. Okay. There's a lot of actions, reactions, overreactions, counteractions regarding to the last several days of protests sprouting up in the USC. Actually, not in the USC, but all over the world. But in the United States, there have been about 40 campuses being affected a great deal in our country, the United States. And I would throw this video over to one particular local public campus on the lower food chain, which would have been the community college level. The majors, mostly private enterprises. A lot of people spend a lot of federal money in those campuses and try to get an education out of it. And for a lot of it, they are. And because of student activism, because of certain topics that matter close to their heart, are really attracting a lot of criticism from the media. One fiery agitator of himself calls himself a conservative, but I think he's more of an agitator half the time in the first place. Joe Scarborough on MSNBC. And he likens the students to be of children. These are young adults in their 20s trying to get an education, had pushed their way through lower end to the upper end of college systems. And they see an injustice and they want to protest about it, much like the previous generations had regarding other situations before them. And when I hear a media pundit claiming that there's no adults trying to curtail the kids, I really think he was never part of that protesting generation, or wanted to protest of anything that mattered a great deal to him. I'm seeing a lot of passion on both sides. They don't want the war, period, but they have different viewpoints, strongly worded and strongly adhered to. Now, one side's right, the other side is wrong. Both are unwilling to admit that both sides are still struggling with the identity on this one here, because yes, what has happened for the past several months, tragic as it is, and if happened to go back into further history all the way to the formation of it, yeah, even larger than that. When you're a history buff, sometimes taking a look at the larger viewpoints, and you have to look at certain areas, whether or not who's at fault and who's not, depending on how you're perceiving it. This situation we got going on with the genocide happening in the Gaza Strip, it still blows my mind what's going on. If there should have been a major protest, there should have been major protest, but this unleashed a monster they can't put back into the bottle. And both sides are having issues and conniption fits and willing to tear each other apart over it. Which brings me to the local area. I'm not just talking about USC or UCLA. I'm talking to the local area of the Antelope Valley area. I'm talking about local college campus. So I'd be aiming this one at the chairman of the board. I'd be aiming this at everybody in the administration area, concerning about our situation happening out there. Give me one moment, please. Put you on pause. I would be sending this over to Dr. Jennifer Zellet and Patty McClure. Both, I understand, are honorable people, and they are controlling Antelope Valley College. My place that I am still attending at off and on at times. This particular semester, I had issues I had to take care of and still working on until the next term happens to come up for the fall. I am also concerned about situations happening that may pop up in our own campus that may affect a great deal of operations. With all the angst, with all the pent up frustration, misconceptions, misinformation, and a lot of directed ire, I wanted to address this to Antelope Valley College because I'm not quite sure if we're going to be unscathed or untouched by this. Now, granted, I know they've been keeping up, well, I assume anyway, regarding what's been happening. I'm not trying to find blame in anything. As a student of a lot of topics I have studied at the college, but also a student in life, being a 58-year-old fort, I've seen, I've read, absorbed, and hearing a lot of pushback from the media and also on social boards regarding this. It is a student's right, it is an American right in our country to protest what we feel and what we find is quote unquote un-American, or what we would consider un-American, what we consider right and wrong, what it would be considered imperative for us to get the message across. And the only way we know how, because if any or all methods are being shut down, then the only choice of action is to take direct communication to the people, which means they would occupy an area to promote, to protest, to make their mark, to express themselves. Now, the First Amendment can only go so far. It does give us our freedom to express ourselves in many ways, but there are limitations on that. It's not a complete and absolute right. Neither are the Bill of Rights, as they are constantly reevaluated by each Supreme Court, by each Supreme Court justice, whether it be liberal or Republican or independent, whether it be conservative or very active. So our rights are constantly reevaluated under the interpretation of the U.S. Constitution. And in this situation here, this would be brought out to our campus if it was going to be a staging ground. I'm saying if it's going to be a staging ground at this point. I was grateful for learning about more of the political process than I had paid attention in my youth. They gave me the bare basics and not much of it in the K through 12 a long time ago. And then when I picked up on one particular political science class at a junior college a long time ago, I really guess I wasn't paying attention much to it, of what activism was all about, because we didn't have that much to study about activism, even concerning about the activism happening during the Vietnam War, which would have been a more direct one. But since that time, my time away from the college for more than 3 decades and coming back into the system again, things have changed. Rules have changed a lot more than what I was aware of. But our basic right to demonstrate, to bring forth the message to people that we, as a people, are trying to bring forth a change or may make awareness that a change has to be made. The students are trying to do that one way or another. I'm hoping that somewhere in those messages of each of those campuses, the students are trying to say that they're getting sick and tired of the war, of corporate greed, corporate media. They're getting sick and tired of governments trying to fund genocide one way or another. They're getting sick and tired or scared. They are scared to death of the world that's changing around them. I applaud the students' efforts to bring in that message across. And sometimes the media doesn't cover it as much. But there's social media to carry out more of the message, if that media will allow it as well. With the invention of social media that we have these days, it's a catch-22 situation. They're only allowed to go so far with their message before something happens, something triggers the companies, and they say, okay, that's it. Terms and conditions have been violated, breached, strained to the point of breaking. Therefore, we either limit or cut it off. Sometimes students have no choice but to go to the streets and demonstrate or take over institutions that gave them the information, gave them the rights, not gave them rights, but awareness of how to do things. And they're demonstrating it. So for political pundits on news organizations who throw themselves as high and mighty and lofty as hell, who call for adults to step in, well, I hate to tell them this, but the adults had educated the children into sandboxes, and now the kids grew up to be adults and telling the older generation what they're thinking of what happened and what needs to be changed. And if the older generation doesn't understand this, well, the younger generation is going to have to make sure this is known. The older generation should be proud of it to a point, because they're saying that the younger generations has taken the lessons to heart and expanded upon them. Now, doing damage to property is not encouraged, but making their voices known is another thing. But it also depends on what kind of voices and message that they're trying to relay to other people, in the hopes of not promoting violent confrontations. I worry about my campus of Antelope Valley College. I'm worried that some of that might be bleeding over a little bit, but I'm hoping that maybe somewhere that there's maybe a mixed blessing of sort to allow students to show their discontent of whatever they have an issue with, to express themselves. Now, granted, on public institutions, they're supposed to allow this, but I know there's always limitations on it. On the private ones, that's a different story altogether. Even on the private ones, they would only allow so much leeway before the leash is pulled and they got to be yanked back into position again. It's what I'm seeing more of. Then I'm hearing, as I said before, the media pundits out there saying, where are the adults? Where are the adults? Well, the adults are in front of you. But they're also demonstrating because of their kids need to be heard and seen about this one too. I can't tell you how many protests there have been in the United States. Somebody could try doing a Google search on this one. How many protests we've had concerning about major situations that have been happening all over that we tried to raise messages for. But was people actually listening? Was there actually enough public outcry and pushback to allow changes to happen? The question is, why hasn't the United States government officially recognized that our First Amendment rights were being demonstrated, at least cheered, because civic duties are being promoted, demonstrated, hopefully encouraged. But I know there's only so much limit. There's only so much. Out here in the West Coast, for the UC system, there's been like several of our campuses out here, from San Diego all the way up to the California border. Students wanting the changes to be made in the UC system regarding divestments. They want them changed. They want them gone. They don't want Israel to be a recipient. They don't want the Palestinian people to be threatened any further than they already are by Israel, and Israel's doing a hell of a job on that one. They said they kept wanting to get hostages out of here, but with a military force that practically leveled Gaza to nothingness. I don't know what else they want to do. From a little bit of information or a little bit of resources I've gathered, to understand that Gaza Strip is totally dependent upon Israelis' mercy. Until people were kidnapped, some killed, tortured, mutilated, and brought into Gaza. It's like seeing the four horsemen coming down and causing holy tribulations, Armageddon spilled upon everybody, and still continuing. Areas away from our country do have a direct impact on us, whether we understand it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not. Saying how the UC systems are being influenced now by student behavior. This has to be on the minds of those who are in charge of administration of the AVC system. But I wanted to make this an observation of someone seeing these things happening, and how much it makes me a little, I'm not quite sure if I'm inspired, insulted, or plain out just trying to figure it out. Am I taking a side on the conflict that we have out there? Because if I try to put it in certain perspectives on this one, it's complicated, convoluted, and this particular dynamic that had been insinuated and instilled upon us for the last several months, this is really having a detrimental effect on everybody these days. And it scares me. It scares me to see this particular war happening in front of us, and that the war has poured across our academic fields of endeavor. But these students have the right to express themselves, as they had in other periods of our history. They have the right to do so. Damaging property is a different story altogether. But getting the message out of how they're feeling, what they're thinking about, and what the goals are, those also need to be explored, understood, and if there's any way of either a compromise or if there's going to be no compromise. So this is addressed to Antelope Valley College and to the general public. I go to college. I've been there since 2015. It's been my home for almost a decade. At times I've taken a little time off from it because of things happening in my own personal life, my own health, and that of my family. So I had to do things that had to be the priority. But I still hold dear to the educational system. It still matters a great deal to me. I don't want to see anything happening to the campus, but if the students, one way or another, want to express their own viewpoints of what's happening, should our campus not allow that Pandora's box to be open or not? I choose my words on this one. I choose my words on this one. I support freedom of speech, but I also know that courts in our land have changed it a great deal. What's allowed, what's not allowed. With that observation and that note, let us hope that there will be some kind of peaceful resolution instead of continuing violence, because that is not a desirable outcome of any sort, of any time, of any kind. With that,